if you adopt atheism or naturalism, what implications does that have on your life? Now, what I'm going to be suggesting tonight is that life becomes absurd from almost every single perspective. The question of purpose, the question of ultimate purpose, is something that has been around for we don't know how long, God knows how long, right? It's been there from the beginning of time, if you like. Philosophers, thinkers, they've engaged with this question. They've asked this question. They've tried to figure out the answers to this question. And this is a question that many of us ask today. What is the purpose of my existence? What is the purpose of my life? Why am I here? Why do I exist? And what I want to suggest here is that if you adopt atheism or naturalism, there is no answer. There is no ultimate purpose to your existence. Now, before I sort of discuss this any further, let me just highlight that when you say you're an atheist or a naturalist, you are denying a creator, a cause. And essentially what you are saying otherwise, or in another way of looking at it, is that everything is a result of random physical processes. Atoms and molecules have been whizzing around for God knows how many years, obviously pun intended here, God knows how long. Atoms and molecules whizzing around at random have been colliding into each other and have resulted in everything that we see in existence today. And I want you to really think about this for a second. Essentially, everything we see in existence today is one big accident. It's an accidental byproduct of lengthy processes, random, cold, physical processes that have been taking place at random and have resulted in everything we see in existence today. And that includes ourselves. And if that is the case, brothers and sisters, ladies and gentlemen, if that is the case, then where is the ultimate purpose? Accidents don't have a purpose. You spill milk, it's spilt milk. It doesn't have a purpose. It wasn't intended. And I found myself in the very same position because what I realized was if you logically follow through with the implications of atheism and naturalism, that's what we're discussing here. If you logically follow through with the implications, you end up at the realization that there is no ultimate purpose to existence. And that creates a lot of angst. It creates a lot of anxiety inside the human being. I suffered from anxiety and depression related to these existential questions for a very long time. And I thought through these things as well, and I tried to find answers. But I realized that logically speaking, there were no answers, at least to start off with the question of purpose, ultimate purpose. Now, what do I do in this position, I thought to myself? And as have many philosophers throughout history, what do we do when you end up in this position? Now, there are a few ways people have tried to deal with this type of existential nihilism, if you like, that there is no ultimate purpose to life. One of the ways was, you had the existentialist philosophers, and what they suggested, at least most of them, they said, look, you end up in a position where there is no purpose to life. You recognize this, acknowledge this. But now what you have to do is you have to live with purpose. You have to give yourselves purpose. You have to make purpose up for yourselves. And they would present this idea in a very eloquent and uplifting way. And to be honest, when you're in that position, there's only so much you could do. So I commend them for that. However, the thing about human nature is we don't like to be lied to. And we don't like lying to ourselves. And essentially what we're doing is when we say, I have no ultimate purpose, but I'm going to give myself purpose, what we're essentially doing is we're saying, I'm going to make purpose up. I'm going to make purpose up for myself. In other words, if you want to look at it in a crude way, we're actually lying to ourselves just to get by. And that didn't sit well with me. It didn't work for too long, right? And it doesn't work for many people. So that doesn't work. And the other alternative, if you like, was you can reduce it down to biology. You can say, well, I've evolved and I'm here, and the only purpose to my existence, this accidental existence, is to propagate my genes, as Richard Dawkins would have you believe in the selfish gene. Now, if you want to reduce it to such a level, then be my guest, do that. But that's no different from eating and sleeping. We do these things anyway. But yet we still ask the deeper questions of life. What is the purpose of my existence? And what's really funny is recently I watched a clip by Richard Dawkins, and he's gone even further with his understanding in regards to the purpose of our material existence, at least. And he even says that the human being, we're nothing but just disposable, and I'm paraphrasing his words, we're just nothing but disposable machines for our genes. Now, well, that's going to really help us finding our ultimate purpose, right? That type of outlook, right? So that didn't really help me. And that didn't work for me either. So now I'm thinking, okay, there seems to be no avenue here as to, or way I can take out of this conundrum, out of this problem. So I thought, you know what? Maybe value is what I need to think about. Human life is valuable. It's sacred. We all acknowledge this, we all realize this, we all understand this. Even atheists and naturalists understand this. Humanism. It's based on one of the tenets, the fundamental tenets is that human life is sacred, it's valuable. So I said, you know what, I have no purpose to live, but life being valuable, that should be enough to keep me going. Well, when I inquired and I thought about the question of value, you soon realize that again on atheism and naturalism, there is no special value to human life. On naturalism and atheism, and when we understand this, like I said, it all boils down to what? Blind, random physical processes. There is literally no difference between me and the pen. Now, on hearing this, you may be outraged. You may think, what is he talking about? You're conscious, you're rational, you feel, you're a human being, right? You're alive. We'll say all of these things. We're probably thinking of these things right now. Now, I can understand the sentiments that we have. However, let's not get sentimental, because at the end of the day, there's no difference. It's just one arrangement of atoms and molecules as opposed to another. And these ideas that you may be just firing off in your heads right now, that he's more conscious, he's more valuable, he's rational, he's intelligent, hopefully you think he's intelligent, but whatever the case is, all of these things that you think, these are simply, on atheism and naturalism, these are simply ideas that you may have picked up from society, may have thought up in your minds right now, but they have no intrinsic value, because they are a result of nothing but chemical firings in your brain, which are a result of atoms and molecules. That's all it is. Now, hopefully we can start to appreciate something here, which is that on atheism and naturalism, the human being is being pushed into a corner. You're being reduced down, or reduced to the point where you can't even account for those things you know to be true as a human being. The things that make you human, purpose, value. If you can't make sense of these things anymore, at least we should realize there's a bit of a disparity. There's something that's not adding up. This worldview or outlook or ideology, whatever you want to call it, because I know some atheists have a problem me calling atheism an ideology or a worldview, whatever you want to call it, it has implications, and the implications here are that it strips you from being able to account for those very things you know to be true as a human being. And that is problematic. That is highly problematic. We've seen some of the atrocities that such views have resulted in throughout history, and we can see or potentially think of problems that such views can cause in the future. Now, I'm talking about logical implications here, guys, right? I'm not just talking about wishy-washy things. I'm saying let's logically think about it. And when you do, these are the conclusions you come to. I'm going to carry on in my rebuttal, hopefully. Thank you guys for listening.
Thank you. And thank you for inviting me. I'm here on behalf of Atheist Alliance International that you sent the invitation to. And also, thank you very much for coming. This wouldn't be much of an event without you. Now, I don't call myself an atheist. I call myself a non-believer. And from what Imran has just said, you'll understand perhaps why I do that. But I come in friendship. I'm an ex-science teacher, and I don't want to alienate my class. You outnumber me, and that would be a very foolish thing to do. Nevertheless, I may say some things that you find a bit challenging. So, the question is life absurd without God? Or, get it your way round, is life without God absurd? Yes. Can I go home now? It is. And I also contend that it's not only absurd without God, but it's more absurd with God. And this question makes two assumptions. First of all, it assumes that there is a God. And secondly, it assumes that life shouldn't be absurd. Well, I want to examine those two propositions. The questioner obviously thinks that life shouldn't be absurd. And I'd like to ask why. Why do they think that? To my mind, That's the real question. You and I might agree that that statement is absurd, wouldn't we? Yes? What about this one then? Is that so absurd? That you might think that's absurd, I might think that's absurd, somebody else might not. It really depends on whether the homework belongs to you or not. So it's a matter of opinion. Now, I would like to say that some of this comes from the fact of human egocentrism. We all live inside our heads looking out. So naturally, we think that we're at the center of everything. We used to think that our planet was at the center of the solar system and that the sun went round it. We now know that's not true. And we used to think that God made the universe for us. There is no evidence for this, and it's a very narcissistic viewpoint. Let's examine that claim. Did God make the universe for us? Is that a reasonable claim, or is that an absurd statement? Well, we now know that the universe began around 13.8 billion years ago. We used to say it was 13.7. This is, of course, an estimate, and recently the estimate was improved, and we now say that it's 13.8. But mankind only arrived on Earth about 200,000 years ago. So, a reasonable question is, what happened in between? Why the gap of 13,799,800,000 years? Isn't that absurd? So, as an ex-science teacher, I want to go into a bit of scientific reality here. Scientific observed facts, repeatedly, shareably observed facts, and explanations, theories, which are mental models based on those facts. So, we know that Earth actually orbits the sun. And we know that the sun is a star, and it's a star in a galaxy that we call the Milky Way. Now, there's about 100 billion, some people say about 200 billion other suns in the Milky Way, and there's about 100 billion, some people say 200 billion other Milky Ways, galaxies like the Milky Way. And on average, thanks to the Hubble telescope, we found out that stars, other suns, also have planets orbiting them. In fact, on average, a star has about 7 planets. So, Earth is insignificant. It's only one planet out of about. Now, I can't say that number, so imagine how long it's going to take to count up that number. The point I'm making is Earth is really, really insignificant. And meanwhile, on Earth, each one of us is just a single individual out of a total population of humans of 7.4 billion. It's probably more than that now, that's an old figure. So, however you look at it, numerically, we are monumentally insignificant, whether you compare us to the population or to the universe. Now let's take a look at our lives. Average human life is 79 years. Let's compare that to the life of the Earth. The Earth has been around for about 4.5 billion years. The universe, as we said earlier, has been around for about 13.8 billion years. So however you look at it, whether in terms of time, duration, durability, or in terms of number, we are monumentally insignificant. We are ants. But, as Imran was explaining earlier, we're ants with delusions. We have delusions of our importance. We think there's some ultimate purpose for us. That's very conceited. So, are you important? Am I important? No. Are our opinions important? No. So, what actually is absurd? Thinking that we are important. That's absurd. Is life without God absurd? Well, we've dealt with absurd. Now let's deal with God. On the contrary, I would contend that life with God is more absurd. Let's look at what some believers do. Now, I know that you're all academics and you're all moderates, and I'm thankful for that because I don't want to be macheted. But you see the point. Some believers are fundamentalists. Some believers are radicalized. And the problem is they get up to some pretty horrible stuff. Some of those atrocities are committed because people believe that they have another life to go to, that this isn't their only existence. That thought devalues life itself, because what's promised is magic. It's eternal. It's bliss. It's got everything you could wish for. So this life now is puny and trivial. And you can get up to all sorts of things here because it doesn't matter. All you've got to do is ask for your forgiveness and say a few prayers, and you will go up there where life is perfect forever.
John, that was a bit of a biryani, to be honest, just to give you a context of what I mean by biryani. A bit of a mix and match of everything. So I'm going to try to deal with this the best I can. First
I like
and foremost,
biryani.
Next time I see you, I'll definitely bring you some. So, look, John, one of the things you said which startled me, which was, we're not important, our opinions are not important. He mentions this in his book too. Now, if that's the case, then John, why come here today and present a case for your position, right? First and foremost. It gets better. So why come here and present a case for anti-theism in particular? Because that's how you represent yourself, that you're an anti-theist. And secondly, why write a book which is, reasonably thick and is quite a long read if your opinions don't mean anything? Honestly, because much of this book, John, much of this book is full of your opinions, right? Essentially.
Thank you for promoting it for me.
That's no problem. If you guys want to read it, go ahead. Here it is. Yeah. But so I don't get that. There's a bit of a contradiction here, John. So I would like you to clarify that specific point. If your opinions mean nothing, then why are you on this trajectory as to, promoting your outlook and having debates and having discussions and making videos on YouTube, writing books, coming here today, etc.? That would be interesting to know from your perspective. One of the ways John tried to highlight that life is absurd, he began with the earth, and he tried to highlight earth is insignificant from the perspective although I don't see how this is related to what we were discussing, but nevertheless, I'll address these points. He said the Earth is insignificant because it's one planet amongst, I don't know the number, was a huge number of other planets that are out there. Well, that's one way of looking at it. That's your opinion, John, as to what we're seeing here, what we're observing here. Another way of looking at it, another opinion could be, well, that's what makes Earth special. That there is so much out there that this one blue little dot, Carl Sagan on one of his covers, I don't remember what the book was called, but he called it the picture where he had the blue little dot on the cover. It was fascinating that amongst all of this vast space, there is this one planet that has life, and that too intelligent life. That, I would say, another way of looking at it, that makes Earth very significant from that perspective. And secondly, life, intelligent life. Not only any form of life, but we have intelligent life here. So you can flip that and look at it the other way too. So that's my specific opinion on that. So you highlighted that you made a statement that, look, life is absurd, or life is absurd on atheism and naturalism, but it's more absurd with God. You didn't actually go ahead and really show us as to why that's the case. Now, obviously, I don't know did you get a chance to read the Quran or look into Islam before coming to this debate?
Not a lot, I confess.
Okay, if you had, you probably would have changed some of the slides that you had there, because you had some generalizations that you shared there. Again, you shared some of your opinions in regards to what religious people do or have done, etc. Now, your book is full of such examples as well. You obviously predominantly attack the Christian tradition as to some of the bloodshed and the evils that have happened. But just for a second, if I move over here, just to share this with you. Now, I would agree with you, obviously, now throughout history, religions have been, and there have been some pockets of Islam and Muslims too that have done some atrocious things, no doubt. I'm not denying this. But so have the anti-theists too, right? Those that deny God. Now, there's a very interesting book that I'd like to give you the reference of. It's called War and Peace in Islam. Definitely have a read. And what the author has done, he's sort of tallied from the year 0 to 2008 the number of death tolls which have resulted from different groups throughout history. And interestingly, Christianity is right up there, and Christianity is right up there with a figure of, let me see here. So it shares the largest with between 119.42 million and 236.66 million victims, right? Medium of 178.04. Interestingly, the second group that's up there, any guesses?
Well, probably atheist, but
yes, and the anti-theist group.
I would contest that description.
Well, you can contest it with the author of this book. I'm sure he would like to hear from you. So it has a figure of 124.41 million deaths from the year 0 to the year 2008. So look, if we're going to play a numbers game, John, as you've done in your book as well, it goes both ways, right? You can do whatever you like in this world, and you'll get paradise up there. Well, that's not the Islamic tradition. Let me just give you some information regarding what we believe as Muslims. This life is extremely significant from the perspective of how we engage in this life. We are told to do good, live as upright human beings, serve humanity. And it's for doing the good that we do in this life that we get an eternal paradise, right? And there's a stark warning for those that don't do this. Because paradise it'll just be given to you because you do whatever you like. You have to put in the work here. So there's a very interesting philosophy there that I really recommend that you look into further for your research. You said something. You said a point about. You said something about that I said the example of the hive bees and that they didn't have any purpose. I didn't say that. You misquoted me. I was referring to Darwin. And Darwin highlighted that if we had evolved under other conditions, different conditions, our moral outlook of right and wrong, if you want to call it, that would have been as is seen by the bees, if you could say such a thing, which is we right for the mother bee to kill its fertile daughters, etc. So it'll just be a different set of morals, if you like, because of different conditions that we've evolved under. Right?
Different species in that case.
But the point is that the point that he's highlighting, and the point I was highlighting, that evolution renders morality subjective, is subject to change, is subject to the conditions that we develop under. It does not render morality objective in any way, shape, or form, nor does it give us an understanding of what good is and bad is, what right is, what wrong is. It's not concerned with this, right? It's an unconscious process. It doesn't have an intent. It doesn't have a mind. It doesn't have a direction.
Correct.
Right? So there's problems there. That's why I highlight that. If you look at it from that perspective, you end up in the position where, again, at best, morality is subjective.
Where to begin? What Imran is doing there, and he admits it really himself because he has to use both words, is he's conflating atheism with naturalism. Atheism is a lack of belief in the claims of believers. Until believers can come up with some evidence for God, then the fallback position is the same with regard to, the Loch Ness Monster. Until there's some evidence for it, we're right not to be, to be suspicious, to be non-believers. And to get around that problem, what Imran has had to do is tack on naturalism to atheism so that he can rubbish that rather than the target, which is just not believing. I've got some brilliant cartoons about this, which I should have put together to show you on the screen. But I don't call myself an atheist. And let me ask you a question. Hands up if you don't believe in fairies. Hands up. Come on, be honest. It's not scary. You can put your hand up if you don't believe in fairies. Okay? Most of us don't believe in fairies. Should we have a special word for you? Are you a-fairyists then? We don't need this word, do we? Now, he says that anti-theists have committed atrocities. And he's right. There was Stalin. He was a famous non-believer. He committed atrocities. Pol Pot, he committed atrocities. And there's some other more dubious ones, because Hitler, of course, was actually a Catholic. And I'm not sure about Mao, whether he was a Confucian or what. But the point is, yes, non-believers have committed atrocities, but they haven't done it for belief. They haven't done it for no God. They've done it for greed, for power. The same as any other person that commits atrocity. Morality. It's changed. Thank heavens it's changed. Would we want to go back to the days of witch burning? Would we want to go back to the days of, and it still happens in some countries, noticeably theocratic Muslim countries, stoning to death female adulterers? Would we want to? Or would we prefer morality to change, to get more modern? I think the latter. Thank heavens, morality has changed. We've grown up. We're not Stone Age men. And Imran's right. My book is about my opinion. Of course it is. That's all we have. But I didn't say we couldn't have them. What I said was they're unimportant. My book has made not a ripple in space-time. The universe has gone on as if it never happened. That's because my opinion doesn't matter. The reason I do this, he asked me why I do this, it's because I'm against unnecessary division. All that religions do is set people against people. It wouldn't be so bad if there was only one. I say none of them are true until there's evidence for a God. Give me some. Give me some evidence. Not argument. It's a common mistake for people to think that argument is evidence. It isn't. Just because we want an ultimate purpose doesn't mean that there is one. That's like a child wanting something for Christmas. Humans are not special. Does a mosquito have value? Eh? Who's the judge? It's us. Do we have a conscience that we have eradicated smallpox? No. Because it's humans first. disease well down the list. Value is a matter of judgment. It's not falling on us from the sky. We have the power. Imran sounded as though he was elevating humans to the level of judges. That's something of a claim.
Okay, so this section will be a discussion, a bit of back and forth between our two speakers.
Yeah. So, hello, John.
Yes, hello.
Hi there. I think before we start this discussion session, it's very important to determine something. Do you believe your opinions matter or don't they matter?
They matter to me.
Okay, so
But they don't matter to the universe.
no, because if you don't believe your own opinions matter, then I'm not going to take them seriously. There's no point. This discussion becomes absurd from that perspective, then, right? So if you believe your opinions matter, then obviously they will matter to us as well. So because we're having trying to have a discussion today regarding a very important topic. So you do acknowledge your opinions matter, right?
Well, in the confines of this room, certainly, yes.
So if we had this discussion outside this room, would your opinions matter or not? I mean, it's a very simple question. I mean, you wouldn't be here today expressing your views if you didn't believe your opinions mattered.
Well, I was going to save my response to your challenge that why do I do this? Why am I here debating for my closing remarks? But okay, I can take your question now. I do it because I want a secular world.
You want a secular world?
I want a world in which religious opinions do not control political or educational matters.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So look, you just said you want a secular world where religious opinions do not have
influence.
Exactly. Yes. So, but to do that, wouldn't you say if we were going to do this in a academic way at least, wouldn't you say you would have to first understand and study all religions or look into them at least, which you obviously haven't done when it comes to Islam today, right? So why have the outlook already that that's what you want when you don't even know what Islam has to say regarding life, regarding man life in the universe, regarding other fundamental things that are relevant to us as human beings?
Well, that's a good question. It's because without evidence for a God, it doesn't really matter what any of the scriptures of any religion do say.
So
you might as well say that my Loch Ness monster is pink and likes Nutella.
Okay, so let's try to unravel this a bit. So now, and I think it's important to highlight this, John. You seem to have an underlying premise, which is evidence is what comes from observation.
Yes.
Do you acknowledge, or is your view, or your outlook, that science is the only way to truth?
Yes.
Okay, good. So do you not see the issues with that outlook, or the problems with that outlook?
Well, you can try explaining it to me.
So let me give you an example. Have you been to India? Have you been to India?
No, I haven't.
You haven't been to India?
I'd love to.
Okay, do you believe India exists?
Yes.
Okay, so you haven't been there, you haven't observed it, yet you believe it exists.
The evidence is fairly convincing.
Okay, so what do you mean by the evidence is fairly convincing?
I've seen photographs taken from space.
Brilliant, okay. What else?
Do we need more?
Okay, fine, fair enough. I was just giving you the benefit of the doubt that you can give us a bit more so I can work.
I know of people who have come from India, who have visited India.
Okay,
a friend of mine is there now.
Okay.
And I'm on Messenger and Facebook with him. He's currently, where is he currently? Is it Calcutta? No, I can't remember.
So look, here's the problem, John. You haven't observed India yourself, yet you believe it exists based on photographs and people that have been there. Now, how do you know those photographs are actually of India, and that you're not just being told they're of India?
Well, I think that you'd have to. I mean, you're on a loser there because you're having to try to rubbish all of the photographs taken from space by all of the spacecraft, all of them orbiting satellites, and all of the spacemen that have been in the IS.
Have you seen yourself satellites that are up there right now?
Yes, you can observe satellites.
But have you observed them yourself through a telescope?
I have, yes.
You have? Okay. So here's the thing. What I'm saying regarding India is you haven't observed it yourself. So what I'm saying essentially is your belief India exists is based on something called testimony, right? In philosophy, this is known as authentic and valid testimony, right? Which is, by the way, John, an integral part of the scientific method, right?
Well, yes.
Something you deny in your book itself.
But the testament can itself be tested. I mean, with the right equipment, I can go and investigate India for myself.
That's a potential, John. But right now you haven't done that, yet you believe India exists, right? So your belief is not based upon what you can do as far as observing it. It's based on something else. So what I'm trying to highlight to you, John, is that are you willing to acknowledge that there are other routes to knowledge other than just science, which you're demonstrating right now? By highlighting that you believe India exists, although you haven't observed it yourself. Pictures are testimonials. Someone is telling you those pictures are of India. You're going by the testimony of people. Let me give you another example which may be closer to home, which may help you a bit better, if you don't mind, right? Do you believe evolution, the Darwinian mechanism, is true?
Yes.
Okay.
I don't, listen, as an ex-science teacher, I don't use terms like I believe. I use terms like the evidence shows. The evidence shows.
Shows that?
That evolution is a fact.
So you believe the Darwinian mechanism in particular?
Well, now, are you going to pin me down to a man who died 150 years ago, or are you going to allow me to update evolution with what we've discovered since?
Give us your definition then. What do you want to call it? Evolution? Just evolution in general?
Well, at its basic level, all evolution means is change. And we can observe change happening today, and we can see evidence of a progression of things that happened in the past, in the fossil record and so on. And so the best explanation is that change happened in the past too.
Okay, good. So look, that's good you're saying that. So what I'm asking you specifically is, do you believe the theory of evolution is true?
Yes.
Okay, so in you saying yes, have you done all of the observations which led to that conclusion of that particular theory?
This is the "were you there" argument.
Well, that's coming from your own perspective, because you said evidence is something which is observable. Yes. It's something that's repeatable and something that's shareable.
Yes.
Anything, and you've said also in your book and your videos that anything that comes from the human mind can't be trusted because it's tainted.
Yes.
Your words.
Yes, that's right.
So the theory that you believe in is coming from the mind of a scientist.
No. The theory that I subscribe to is that change can be observed, and potentially I can go and observe change. I can go. Have you seen the big Petri dish experiment?
No, I haven't.
A fantastic experiment. They made a Petri. You know what a Petri dish is? Yeah. It's a culture container which you put a nutrient jelly in, and then you can grow bacteria. Okay? They made a great big one.
So let's make a distinction here. There is a difference between observations of science and theories of science, right?
Yes.
So what I'm trying to highlight to you is that there are other routes to knowledge which are involved even within the scientific method itself, which you have to rely upon for you to believe the conclusions of science.
Well,
which you reject, by the way. So I want to know, which way is it? Do you acknowledge that there are other routes to knowledge, such as testimonial knowledge, or do you hold firm to that science is the only way to truth?
Where you are trying to put words into my mouth here.
I'm asking you the question.
Okay. So
I'm sure everyone's really interested in the science lessons. I'm sure we've got a lot to learn from you, being an ex-physics teacher.
Because you asked me about where I need to use belief in science.
No, I'm asking you a very simple question. Do you acknowledge that there are other routes to knowledge which are integral to the scientific method itself, such as testimony? Or don't you acknowledge that? Are you just saying, just purely, because according to your book, and you may want to change your opinion, that observations, repeatable, and that are shareable, full stop. According to that type of definition, you're pigeonholing yourself in many ways. Because you, in a way, you're denying the scientific enterprise. You're denying science in itself.
No.
Right?
Because...
So just tell me this, John. John, do you believe in the theories of science?
The theories of science do not need believing.
I'm not saying they're absolute. I'm just asking. So do you ascribe...
No, I wouldn't claim they were absolute. I claim that they are the best explanation currently.
And do you acknowledge that they are also what's incorporated in the process of getting to the theory? There are other elements to it, such as testimony, reasoning, argumentation.
We let John make his point.
Yes.
Every theory makes predictions.
Yeah.
And at that stage, you can believe the prediction or not. we would call it a hypothesis. And there will be rival hypotheses, just like there are rival runners in a horse race, and you can choose your favorite. Okay? And that is where belief is applied in science.
So you'd acknowledge that?
At the frontiers where we don't know.
Okay, so let me ask you in a simple way. We've got 1 minute about 2 minutes left. Do you acknowledge testimony as a valid route to knowledge? It's a simple question.